Okay, I don't see anyone else waiting, so I'm going to get started, and this will be recorded, so just so you all know, and we will be able to distribute the recording afterwards. But we'll get started. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to this Managing Remote Teams webinar. I just wanted to very briefly introduce myself and Arbite. So my name's Emily. I'm the content creator at Arbite, and we are a contact solutions provider. We provide powerful and easy to use contact solutions that empower businesses to have more pleasant conversations with consumers. So that's who we are. And I'm very, very excited to introduce our guest to you. We have Ben White here with us. He has 10 years of experience in talent acquisition. So he has worked in the past as a headhunter and a corporate recruiter for 2 Fortune 500 companies, and today he manages a team of remote recruiters at Titus Talent Strategies. They're a talent strategies firm focused on discovering high performers, team development, employee engagement, and retention. So Ben, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have you.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Thanks. Okay, so briefly, I'm just going to go through what we're going to be talking about and why you're all here. For anyone, I know I'm sure we have a mix of remote employees, remote managers, but just to briefly go over our outline, we're going to be talking about how to start the process of understanding each one of your team members and what their needs are as remote employees, what your one-on-ones can and should look like as a manager, what team bonding can look like is something that you don't have to give up during this time where many of us are remote, and then finding the balance in your leadership style to be empathetic but motivational. And then at the end, there is going to be Q&A, so please ask as many questions as you might have during the course of the webinar, and we will get to all of them at the end. So we're just going to dive in now and talk about how to find out how your team is actually doing. So before this webinar, I was doing a little bit of research on what remote employees value and what they are struggling with. And one of the biggest things that came up was a study that said 19% of remote employees reported loneliness as their biggest struggle remotely. And so for that 19%, loneliness was a bigger struggle than focusing or being distracted. And I thought that was quite remarkable. So I wanted to ask you, Ben, how do you approach conversations regarding how your employees are actually doing? Maybe apart from just their work performance, but mentally. And do you think those conversations, I guess we can start with, do you think those conversations have a place in the workplace? And if so, how do you approach those conversations?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I think they absolutely have a place in the work, in the workplace. How your people are doing, how they're feeling is going to impact their performance. And if you're a leader of people, I think it's important you have those conversations and you learn. The way I personally do it is so and just to back up a little bit, I've managed a remote team here for the last 3 years. However, we did go into the office once a week. And when you say about a fifth of people, the thing that they're struggling most with is the loneliness, I totally get that. Because even though we're primarily remote, taking away that even one day that we met a week has had a significant impact on a lot of my people. So the way I've gone to handle that is we do a lot of frequent check-ins, but once a week I do have a one-on-one with them, where we specifically, just the two of us, get together. Most of the time it's via video. If that can't happen, we do a phone call. But that call is really about what they want to discuss. If I have things I need to go to my team about, whether it's a performance issue, whether it's a client issue, or just something I need to kind of cascade down to the team, I'll reach out directly and say, hey, do you have a few minutes? But when we get to that once a week time, where we're doing the one-on-one, that's really about them. And I encourage them to bring forth whatever it is that makes sense for them to talk about. Sometimes that is project work. They're going to tell me, hey, this is how this is going. I'm having difficulties. What do you suggest I do? We can kind of go through that strategically. But sometimes it's, it's, oh man, I'm having a real hard time here. I've got my dog's barking. I'm trying to have these meetings, but everyone's home and it's challenging. So I think the first key is creating the space for them to actually be able to have that conversation and communicate to you. I think the second thing is you do have to ask. So, we'll go through, and if, we make it through part of the conversation and they haven't, given me any indication of how they're personally doing, I'll go, how are you doing? How are you holding up? And, if you have that kind of relationship and you've created that, and hopefully you have over, however long you've managed that person, hopefully they do feel confident in letting you know, hey, I'm struggling with this. This is a rough time. You might not always have the solution to that, but just hearing them, just letting them talk it through and being, in ear for them can sometimes be a huge help. So for me, it's just making sure you're cognizant of it, making sure you create that time on a weekly basis, letting them talk, letting them come to you, and then, occasionally prompting them, asking them how they're doing. Those are my keys.
Yeah, those are great. And I know you kind of touched on this, but one-on-ones,
Yeah,
it sounds like you have them regularly with your team. And for me personally, I have a one-to-one with my boss, Tracy, every week. But
yeah,
then we also have daily stand-up meetings, and we recently incorporated those into our workday because we kind of felt like missing from the office was just the ability to be around your team and feel like you can just kind of hang out, talk about more light stuff. So we started doing that, and it's been great. But for you, when you approach those weekly check-ins, how do you make sure that they're intentional? And I know you kind of gave some tips earlier, but what do your
yeah.
one-on-ones look like, and how do you structure them?
Yeah, so I think it's important to have consistency there, right? You don't want to be playing catch up. We also do a weekly one-on-one. So every single week at the same time, it's a repeating meeting. I meet with all of my people. Up until recently, it was Wednesdays because we'd been in the office for that one day a week, and it would basically be almost the entire day. I'd be meeting with each person one-on-one. Uh, in terms on making it intentional and making sure that we cover everything, um, I think we're a little bit more open than that. If I do have issues to discuss, I do it on a kind of a one-off basis. We also have a weekly team meeting. So every Wednesday, we all get on Zoom, we all get on video, and we have an hour in which we go through everything. We start with an icebreaker where we kind of talk to, about what's going on in our weeks. We move into kind of a reporting where we talk about where the company is financially. And then we kind of just, we go over the topics that we're wanting to discuss that week. And it can be things that are popping up, long-term discussions in terms of quarterly goals. And those are very intentional. But the one-on-ones, they're mostly about the employee. They're about the person. What do they want to cover? What's important to them and what's going on in their world? And I make sure that early on I say, hey, this is your meeting. You own it. We're going to cover what you want to cover. I think that's what's had the most impact, is just making sure that we have the time set aside to cover company things, but we also have the time where they can talk to me about what's impacting their day, whatever that is.
Awesome. Okay, so now we're going to move into team bonding. And for
Yeah,
us, we used to do a lot of team bonding. Would go bowling, we had a softball team, just
yeah,
all kinds of stuff. And obviously that's more, it looks different now. So we've been doing
right.
like trivia and Slack and really fun stuff. And our admin team has been coming up with so many cool ideas. But I think the most important thing here is that team bonding really can't stop. Especially now, it's maybe more important than ever. So, what does team bonding look like for you, and how do you approach this with your team?
Yeah, this is a great question, because you're right. It's absolutely important. Your team is going to be more effective. There's going to be better collaboration if you put time and intentional effort into team bonding. And we also used to do that a lot too. Every Wednesday we'd go out for lunch. We'd go and we do activities, and that's something that none of us can do right now. But you're right. You got to keep that going. So looking at the slide, one of the first things we do is we do icebreakers every single week, and we come up with fun and different ones. And it's ways for us to learn about each other. Part of team bonding and team chemistry is actually learning about what makes a person tick, learning about some of the interesting things about people and connecting. So icebreakers at the beginning of our team meeting on a weekly basis, I think that's a great opportunity. It seems like a little thing, but the little things done over and over and over again have a real strong accumulative effect. So we talk, we get to learn a little bit about each other. We also do a happy hour every Thursday. So every Thursday, we send out a Zoom meeting. It says, meet me at the bar. And for an hour and a half, people have the option to show up. And sometimes it's just us getting on Zoom, talking about the week. Sometimes people are doing some light work in the background, some sourcing. And sometimes we're there just, having a drink and enjoying each other's company, and just kind of relaxing and taking a moment to chat. We've also done some games. So we've used Jackbox TV, which is like kind of a trivia game, and it's real fun. It's pretty entertaining, and you guys can all kind of do it together. So we've done that a lot. I will say though, the one thing that I think you have to be cognizant of is sometimes people go, okay, how can we bond? How can we actually do the things we used to do? And they try to do too much, right? So there are employees on your team who will go, happy hour, this is great. I'm energized by this. But you might have people who are like, I'm already busy. I'm working from home. I've got my kids here. My husband or wife is working from home here. I'm already distracted. The last thing I want to do is put a video on, let you into my house, and participate in this. And everybody has good intentions when they do that, but I think that's one of the reasons why I've made it optional. And I've emphasized that, hey, if this is going to add value, if this is going to be a great way for you to connect with your team and bring utility into your life, and you're going to be happy about it, join it. But if you find yourself stressed out, if you find yourself saying, I'd rather take this time and have some tea and read, or whatever it is, please do take that time. I think it's just important not to swing too far the other way. You have to be cognizant of your team and know that, activities like that, again, will be energizing to some people, but if you have introverts on your team who may not be as energized by that, it could be a draining thing. So again, just important to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue into our next topic, which is knowing what energizes and de-energizes your team. So I'm
Yeah,
introverted, but I've
yeah,
kind of realized the value in video as a way to feel connected to people who I
yeah,
work with and who I don't see anymore daily. So there is not, like you said, there is not a one size fits all management style for each
right.
person on your team. So why is it important to understand what each member of your team needs, and how do you go about learning that about them? How do you ask those questions, and how do you kind of find that out?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and that's not a great like COVID-19 managing remote question. That's a great management at a high level. That's management 101 in my opinion. First and foremost, you should care about your people, right? You should care about the success of your people. And if you don't, it might be time to consider, am I in the right seat? But as a leader of people, it's important that you have buy-in. It's important you care about the results your people produce, and it's important you care about them as people, in my opinion. And if that's the case, then over time, you want to put in intentional efforts to get to know them. You want to ask them, what motivates them. Everybody's not motivated by the same thing. You'll have employees who are really career focused and are like, Ben, how do I get to the next level? And then how do I get to the next level after that? And that's great. You're going to need some of those people. And then you can kind of build your reward system and your feedback system around that. On the other hand, you might have people who are like, Ben, I want to work 40 hours a week. I want to do my job, and then I want to go home and enjoy my life. And what I need from you is the flexibility to do that. I want work-life balance, and that's what motivates me. If you don't know what motivates your people, you don't know what they're in it for, you're not going to be able to lead and inspire them adequately. You're just not. I think that's why it's important. This is another part of that, because what motivates them, what energizes them is the same as what demotivates them or fatigues them. So I think it's important to have these conversations. I think it's important to know your people, because if you're not, if you really don't know your people, you're just not going to be able to motivate them. I don't think you can actually make anyone do anything. Just because you're a manager or a leader, you can't just force people to do something consistently and expect great results. The best way to make someone do something is to make them want to do it. And to make someone want to do that, you have to know how to motivate them. And to know what motivates them, you need to understand them and their drivers.
Yeah. And another great segue, because now we're going to talk about motivation and motivating
Yeah.
your team and finding the balance between being transparent, like you said earlier in your big team meetings, talking about like finances and things like that, but then also keeping them engaged. So how do you find that balance? And do you have any tips for anyone who might be struggling to find that balance?
Yeah, I mean, that can be a tough question anytime, but it's a tougher question in a global pandemic, right? There are a lot of companies right now that are in uncharted waters, and there are some where the situation is a little bit more tenuous. And I think it is really important to be forthcoming and honest, but you have to balance that in terms of being motivational. Sometimes if the situation is pretty grim, you need to be able to portray realism, right, and show people, hey, this is where we're at. This is what we're hoping happens, but right now there's a possibility that we're going to undergo some changes because of the business environment. Um, but at the same time, you want to be motivational, right? You don't want to present the information in a way that's demotivating to people. You want to show people, here's how you can contribute. Here's what we can all do to position ourselves to succeed as best possible. But I think it's a balance. I think and it's not easy. But I would say you don't want to be all doom and gloom, even if the situation is dire, because that's not going to necessarily motivate your people. But you also don't want to ignore it. You don't want to go, hey guys, everything's great. Let's keep on pushing. We're adults here, and people deserve to know how things are. So I think it's finding the happy medium. It's taking the time to one, know your people, know how they're going to want that information shared with them, and then on top of that, just balancing optimism and reality, and giving people actual steps like, hey, if this is a challenging situation, which it is, here's what we can all do. Here's how we can all contribute to the way out. So with everything, I think balance is really important, and this is another situation in which I think that's just kind of paramount.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really all fits together.
Yeah.
The biggest part is understanding your team and then knowing how the information should be disseminated and then motivating them. Yeah, it all fits together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with that, I did see some questions come in, so I want to go through those. Okay, so the first question we have is, how do you support an employee who is struggling due to working from home or personal issues during the pandemic?
Yeah, if you manage any amount of people, you're probably going to encounter this. And I think that answer is different depending on what the situation is, right? Like, for example, let's address the first one. If you have someone who is struggling to complete their tasks, for example, they have tasks they normally be, tasked with completing, but where they're at now, maybe they have kids at home, right? And maybe now they're bearing the brunt of helping them with homeschooling. They've got to set things up, and they have interruptions, what would be their normal workday. First and foremost, I'm of the mindset that you put your people first. If you take care of your people, they're going to take care of your customers. That doesn't change when it gets challenging. If that's the way you operate, then that's how you have to be operating when it's both great and when things are challenging. So for me, first and foremost, you've got to understand what their challenges are, talk to them, find out what their restrictions are, find out how you can help them. So maybe it's as simple as moving some of their tasks around, right? Like, hey, Ben, I can't do what I normally do between 9 and 11 in the morning because I have to help my children with their homeschooling. Well, what can we do to accommodate that? Is there a way to move their task to a different time? Is there a way to assign that task to somebody else and then give them something that affords them more flexibility in terms of when they get work done? I think that's a way to address it. And if they're truly at the point where they go, okay, I need to take some time off, or I need to go down to 50% of what I'm doing, to me, I think you work with them to accommodate that. But I think first and foremost, there's got to be honesty, there's got to be transparency, and if there's trust built up that they can come to you and give you their situation and let you address it properly, that's step one. In terms of people who are struggling, again, that is maybe a little bit of a harder thing to address, right? If you have people who are stressed because of the way things are, because of the situation, I think as a manager, you go to them, you go, how can I support you? And you let them kind of talk it through, right? First, acknowledge the situation, acknowledge they're not alone, and the fact that they're really stressed and they're having a hard time. And then you've got to talk with them about, okay, how can we help? As an organization, how can we support you? It's a great opportunity as a leader to lead from the front, right? Like if you have somebody who's saying, I'm having a hard time completing some of my tasks because I'm stressed, it's a great opportunity for you to jump in and go, okay, what can I take off your plate? And I know as managers, we're busy, right? We have things that we've got going on. We've got things we're juggling as well. But the payoff from showing your people that you're willing to jump in and take some of that burden off them to de-stress them is massive. Leading from the front, showing them that, hey, I understand, I get it. This is important work, and let me help you with it. It's an opportunity that doesn't present itself very often. So those are how I would address and how I have addressed those two things over the last crazy 2.5, 3 months here.
Yeah. And I saw another question about work-life balance. So for you personally, maybe how do you find work-life balance now that our works and our homes are combined? And then
Yeah,
how do you encourage your team to find work-life balance and like shut down at the end of the day?
yeah. I think this is so important too, because I think it becomes easier to burn out when the lines are blurred between work life and home life.
Hmm.
Um, I've been working remote for the last 4 years. And again, I've said this earlier, I go into the office once a day, or I go into the office once a week, but Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm home. So this is not much different, for me and for my team. Um, However, what I try to do personally is I start early, I work hard, and when it's time to close, I close my laptop and I genuinely put it away. Now there are times and there are occurrences in which I'll make an exception. If I have a client who calls me with an urgent need, I'll take it. If my boss or my CEO calls me and they need my help with something or they wanted my opinion on something, I'll take that. But I don't actively seek out the work. I'm not going through my email. I'm not going through and letting it dominate my evening because the work isn't going anywhere. There will always be more. So I try to make a point of saying, here's closing time, here's shut off time, and I'm going to shut off. Again, a few exceptions, but outside of that, it'll be there at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. Those emails aren't going anywhere. They don't disappear. It's not Snapchat. Like they're still going to be there. Um, so, and then as far as my employees, I encourage them to do the same thing. And I'm really consistent about it. I tell them, look, this is Memorial Day weekend. I told my people today, I'm like, I'm going to log on sporadically over the weekend. And if your little icon is green, I'm going to call HR and tell them to take away your access to the internet through Titus. So I think it's important to, so many companies say it. They go, we're about work-life balance, but then they have a litany of exceptions. Be like, well, what we normally are, but this is this, or we have to do it because of this. Your employees are going to lose trust if you do that, and it starts to have very little meaning. So
Hmm.
I just try to be consistent. If you need the time, take the time. If you need the week, if it's Memorial Day weekend, take all 3 days. I don't want to see you doing anything Monday. It'll be there on Tuesday. And then I also say, what can I do to support? You're taking the day off. How can I help? They won't always have something, but sometimes they will. And if they do actually tell you, it's probably pretty important.
Yeah, awesome. I think I saw one more question come in. So it's mental and physical health is always important, but even more important now with COVID-19. So how do you encourage mental and physical wellness on your team?
Yeah. So I think the mental wellness, part of that is stepping away, right? Part of that is allowing people to know it's okay to turn off and take the evening. So I'm not going to belabor that point because I feel like we just talked about it. But I feel like one of the easiest things to do is become overworked because now the computer, you have access to it. And you could literally at any time walk into your office, walk into your kitchen, open your laptop and start working. Letting them
Mhm.
know, hey, step away is step one. Outside of that, most companies do have programs where they can help you get some sort of assistance, whether it's talking to someone. So as a manager, right, you're checking in with your people on a weekly basis, you're talking to them, you're finding out how they actually are. And if they're telling you, if you're seeing the signs over and over again that they're just really having a hard time, you can recommend, hey, we have resources for this, and it's totally up to you. I don't know if it's something you're interested in or comfortable doing, but if you are, I encourage you to do that, and letting them know what's available for them and that it's okay to do that. As far as physical wellness, I think that one's a little bit harder, right? Because different people have different levels of interest in physical activity. There are several people on my team where we're kind of like accountability buddies. So we'll actually have, Apple Watches, and we'll be able to see, oh, they just finished a workout. You can send them a message. I think you can encourage people, hey, this is a beautiful day out. I live in Wisconsin, so those are few and far between. And when they are, I tell my people, go outside. It is probably going to snow tomorrow. Yes, I know it's May, but it still may snow. So I think, that's how you can do that, is just encourage people to get outside, enjoy the time, and just letting them know it's okay. I think that's a big one there.
Yeah, for sure. I saw another question come in about self-sufficiency. I just want to make sure I ask it correctly.
Yeah.
How do you push the team who works from home when the person is used to working in the office?
Yeah.
It says trying to make that person from home more self-sufficient. I think that's a really good question. And he
Yeah.
just expanded here. When they were in the office, things were handed to them, but now at home, how do we push them to do what they used to do at the office?
Yeah, Robert, that's a great question. For me, it's funny. My perspective is that all my employees are already remote, so they're already doing that. But every time I hire somebody, most of those people don't have remote experience. So I go through that a little bit every single time I bring somebody onto the team. Um, so for me, what's nice is our industry, our model, our company, there are very clear guidelines. So I choose to extend trust first. But so I'm going to let you handle it in your own way. I'm going to let you know that I am available. If you're struggling, if you're having issues with something, you can come to me and we can figure out a way to get it done. We can figure out scheduling. But I kind of let the results speak for themselves. You've got clear guidelines, you've got objectives you have to meet, and you're either going to meet them or you're not. And if you meet them, great. Then I can continue to extend trust. You can continue to find, the way that's most effective for you to be successful. And if there isn't, then you have that coaching conversation. You go, okay, so, I see that you had these objectives, you weren't able to accomplish them. What do you think you need to do differently to make sure you're successful next time around? Having conversations like that, I think, are really important. I'm not sure if that 100% answers your question. What kind of guidelines? So Robert, I'm in recruitment, and each one of our people have 4 projects that are responsible for recruiting. And on each one of those projects, we have KPI, right? We have key performance indicators. So that's the amount of people they're engaging, the amount of messages they have to send out, conversations, et cetera. And then on a weekly basis, they have to send out a report to our clients. So those are all clear, established guidelines. You're either going to hit those or you're not. And every week when that report comes out, you see where the progress is, what progress has been made, if they are hitting those, exceeding them, and falling short. So I think, one, whatever role it is, it doesn't have to be recruiting. You can set those guidelines, right? Every single role, what they want you to, oh, there you go, performance indicators is that? Yeah. So find out what those KPIs are, find out what the tasks are, put measurables around it, and allow them to hit those. And if not, then you have a coaching conversation around it.
Perfect. Okay, so looks like we have only 2 minutes left, so I don't want to cut anything off, but yeah, performance indicators was a great answer. Perfect. All right, so that is all we have for you guys, and our emails are here and websites if you want to check out Titus or Arbite. But thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and thank you so much, Ben, for sharing your wisdom and experience with us. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and everyone, thank you. And you will get a recording of this sent to you, so look out for that. But otherwise, have a great day.